Welcome back, everybody, after what must have seemed like a very strange and very different holiday. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to the start of this new term. And although Borlase at home isn't the same as being at Borlase at school, it's really nice to feel connected with the school community. I'm going to try and pop into some virtual lessons to see how you're working this week, and partly because I feel quite out of touch with the school and not seeing you face to face, but also I'm really interested to see how lessons are working in practice. Your teachers have been working very hard to make sure that they've prepared learning for you, and the work that you do now, the curriculum that you cover, is just as important as if you were doing it at school. So it's really very important that you keep your concentration and give everything your full attention as usual. This week actually I'm going to be working for quite a while at school. For a number of days I'm in for the Key Workers School. So I'll take the opportunity to wander up to the top of the fields and take some photographs for you of the sports, well, it's not a sports hall yet, but it's a field that they're levelling in readiness for the sports hall. But I do have to say, when I'm in, it is very strange not having you around and walking through those cloisters without the sounds of your voices and your faces and people running past each other, playing manhunt or whatever it happens to be at break time. There are two significant anniversaries that we celebrate this week in England. It's Shakespeare's birthday on the 23rd of April, and Shakespeare shares his birthday with the patron saint of England, St George. Now, St George is a saint that's depicted in stained glass windows and paintings, usually clad in armour on a white stallion and slaying a dragon. And the patron saint of St George isn't just the patron saint of England. He developed in medieval Mediterranean times and became part of the religious cultures of Islam, of Judaism, of Hinduism. He pops up in the African Brazilian belief system of Candomblé and a number of the pagan faiths as well. So St George, although patron saint of England, is a saint for a global nation. He's a symbol of hope, and he represents the whole world, we could say. We all face dragons in our lives, and the dragon we're fighting at the moment is one that's very different to the one that St George had to fight. This dragon doesn't breathe fire, it doesn't have scales, and the heroes that fight it are not wearing armour, they're not riding horses. Some of those most important heroes slaying that dragon are wearing goggles and face masks and aprons. They need to show great courage, but also patience and tenderness as they slay that dragon. And we all have to dig deep into ourselves to find the mental resilience to cope with slaying this dragon, so that we get through the frustrations that we experience, the loneliness, and the need to be kind and supportive of one another, even perhaps when we're not feeling in a right mood to be doing that. It's understanding how we get each other through this slaying of the dragon. But the main thing that's required to slay this dragon is hope and ingenuity. And we have people all around the world working every day tirelessly on developing antibody tests and a vaccine so that we can finally put this dragon to bed. And I'm sure they will achieve it. The whole world working together as a global community will find a solution and slay this dragon. But this morning I want to hand you over to Mr. Marchant, who's very kindly recorded, as we've just come out of the Easter break, a telling of the oldest story, or one of the oldest stories of hope that we know, the Easter story. So Mr. Marchant.
Welcome to Borlase at Home. I'm sad not to be in school, seeing and teaching many of you, but I'm making the best I can of the nice weather while isolating. The daffodils in the garden remind me of Easter. When I was a child, the big excitement about Easter, for me, was searching the garden for chocolate eggs, which my parents hid each year. There would be mini chocolate eggs hidden by the stalks of daffodils, and if we were lucky, a large chocolate bunny or hen with a nest of marzipan eggs. We would run out into the garden with a basket and race to collect the most eggs, although the rule was that they had to be shared equally at the end to avoid arguments. With Christmas, it's easy to see the link between our celebrations today and the original events. The presents that we give and receive linked to the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh brought by the wise men for the baby Jesus. The story of Easter is linked with our celebrations more tenuously, or perhaps thematically. Anyway, there are no chocolate eggs or bunnies involved. During the reign of Emperor Tiberius, it was a Jewish custom, as it had been for over a millennium, to celebrate the Passover feast, one of the significant religious events written into their laws. Jesus gathered his close friends and chose to go to Jerusalem to celebrate. With its imposing temple, it was the centre of Jewish religion. His friends warned him that the political and religious leaders who wanted to kill him would find it easy to get him while he was there, but he chose to go anyway. In a guest room in a house in the city, he celebrated the Passover meal with his friends. During the meal, he reinterpreted the traditions to create a ceremony still in use today. He took the bread, broke it to share, and said, "This is my body, given for you," as he handed it round. When he handed round the shared cup of wine, he said, "This is my blood, poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." He also told his friends that one of them was going to betray him that night. You can imagine what that did to the atmosphere around the table. And he indicated to John, one of his closest friends, that it would be Judas Iscariot. After the meal, he went with his friends to the Garden of Gethsemane, one of his favourite places in Jerusalem, to have quietness, meditate, and pray in the olive groves. He prayed to God, who he called his Father, asking if he could avoid the events he foresaw, but submitting to God's decision. In the meantime, Judas had slipped away and done a deal with Jesus' enemies that for 30 pieces of silver, he would take some soldiers to where Jesus was and identify him. Jesus was duly arrested, beaten up by the guards, and locked up overnight. In the morning, he was interrogated by the high priests and religious leaders. They asked him whether he was God's chosen leader for the Jewish people that they had been awaiting for over 1,000 years. He said, "Yes, I am the Son of God." That gave them the evidence they wanted to be able to put him to death for blasphemously claiming a relationship with God. Because Judea was a Roman province, they had to go through the Roman judicial system. They took Jesus to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, and assembled a mob outside the building. Jesus was questioned, but refused to answer. He was sent to King Herod, the titular Jewish ruler, who also tried to question him, gave up and mocked him, and sent him back. In the end, Pilate told the chief priests that there was no evidence of a crime deserving death. At this point, the mob was chanting, "Crucify! Crucify!" Pilate stood in front of them, washed his hands in a basin, and said, "His blood be on your heads." Then he ordered Jesus to be crucified. The soldiers took him and flogged him with a whip. The upright part of the cross was already on Calvary Hill outside the city, called the Place of the Skull because it was the site of execution. Jesus was given the horizontal part of the cross to carry up there on his back, a solid log of wood hewn from a tree. Escorted by soldiers and accompanied by a crowd, he set off. He was so weak that he collapsed after a while and was unable to carry the log. So the soldiers hauled a foreigner out of the crowd and made him carry it instead. At the top of the hill, Jesus was nailed to the cross, which was then raised into a vertical position. Criminals were crucified on either side of him. Crucifixion was the most painful form of death a creative Roman Empire could come up with, a punishment so agonizing it was illegal for Roman citizens. Only slaves or foreigners could merit it, and only for the most awful crimes. The victims suffocated to death slowly as they grew weaker and could not hold themselves to breathe. While Jesus hung there, his enemies stood below and taunted him. "He healed others, but he can't heal himself. Come down from the cross, Son of God, and we'll believe in you." He hung there for a few hours, watched by his friends and enemies. Near the end, he said, "It is finished." He died. A while later, the soldiers stuck a spear into him to check he was dead, and separated water and blood poured out. His body was put into a grave, a heavy stone rolled in front, and guards placed. His enemies were aware of the importance of keeping track of the dead body. The next day was the Sabbath day, and due to strict observance of it, all Jews kept away from the dead. The story continues the following morning when some of the women who were close to Jesus taking spices to embalm the body, as was usual. When they got to the tomb, they found no guards, the stone rolled away, and the body missing. They ran and told Jesus' friends, and a couple of them came to look. Peter noticed that the strips of linen that the body had been wrapped in were still lying there, but the cloth that was placed over the head had been folded and put to one side. Over the next day, stories started circulating about people who had seen Jesus. Mary, one of his closest friends, had seen him briefly in the garden outside the tomb, and he had told her to tell the others that he was alive. Cleopas and his friend had walked down the road to Emmaus with Jesus, talking about the Old Testament, and shared a meal. In the evening, a group of Jesus' close friends were gathered in a room, and he stood with them, showed them the wounds in his hands and side, and ate some fish with them. They were overcome with joy and delight. Thomas was missing, and he told the 10 of them they were fantasizing. Unless I can touch the wounds in his hands and put my hand in the hole in his side, I will not believe it. The next night, Thomas was with the other friends, and Jesus was present again and invited Thomas to see his hands and put his hand in the hole in his side, to stop doubting and believe. The Easter story covers a whole range of human experience: friendship, celebration, betrayal, violence, injustice. It covers the best and the worst of life as we experience it. The Easter message I would like to share this year is one of hope, that no matter how awful the experience, how black the darkness, there is hope for a better future. Jesus' friends whose lives had fallen completely apart on Good Friday were filled with joy on Easter Sunday. As we adapt to life with restrictions that may make us frustrated, miserable, angry, as we see the effect of restrictions on friends, see family members unable to work or losing their jobs, or having to work extra hard in difficult circumstances, and as we potentially grieve for the loss of friends or relatives, we have to accept that at times sadness and loss is part of human life. But we also need to hold on to the hope of a future that is better than now, however far away that might seem to us at the moment. Stay home, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you back at Borlase when that becomes possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marchant. And you may all now like to join us in singing the Easter hymn, Lord of the Dance.
On a Friday when the sky